Hey, welcome back. I'm picking off cat fur from the mic. In this video, I want to talk about the WordPress REST API. In this video, I'm going to assume you know what a REST API is, but maybe you're new to WordPress as a developer. So the WordPress REST API has all of these different endpoints that you might want to use, and the idea here is that, yes, some of them are publicly available, but in order to use a lot of them, you would need to be authenticated. So we're going to go over the two main ways of making that happen. The first approach uses cookies. The second approach was introduced in December of 2020, and it's probably what you're interested in. It lets you actually make requests from totally separate external applications. For the first few years that the WordPress REST API existed, you needed an external plugin to make this happen, but for the last sort of year and a half, WordPress just has this feature built in. I think it's pretty cool. Anyways, that's what we're going to cover in this video. Let's jump into the action. So right now I have a brand new empty local WordPress installation. And before we get to application passwords, I want to begin with the standard way of making authenticated requests. In other words, when the REST API was first released, without using third-party plugins, your only real option was to just already be logged into WordPress through, the in-browser logging in process. Then your browser would have a cookie. The cookie could authenticate you. So obviously this approach wouldn't help you if you're trying to make requests from a totally external third-party app. But if you're trying to build any sort of feature on your actual website, this traditional or standard approach is the right tool for the job. So I'm not going to bore you by writing out the code to power this, but I will show you a bit of pre-written reference code. So imagine I want to write a little bit of client-side JavaScript to programmatically add a new blog post. Obviously, you would need to make an authenticated REST API request, right? It's not like any visitor in the world can add a new blog post to your website. So let me activate a new theme. In the description for this video, I'll include a link to this theme on GitHub if you want to borrow this code. But if I activate my new theme and just refresh the home page, in the real world, you probably would have had a button that you click on to programmatically create the new blog post. I just wrote the client-side JavaScript so it runs when I load the page just for this proof of concept. But essentially, if you go into posts, blog post from cookie powered by REST API. So each time I reload, so I just refresh the page 2 more times, there should be 2 more additional posts. Yep. Now really quick, let me show you the code, the client-side JavaScript that's making this happen. Okay, so here's the theme folder you'll find on the GitHub link. If you dig into index.js, I'm just making a fetch request to the REST API for posts. It's a post request, not a GET request, because I want to create a post. For the headers, I'm just saying that it's JSON. We can address what this nonce value is in just a moment, but then I'm just setting the title, the content, and the status. If you're wondering what this nonce value is, well, as you might know, anytime you're using cookies to perform an actual trusted or secure action, you want to be protected from cross-site request forgery. Essentially, in my functions.php file, and again, this is in the GitHub code, I'm just outputting this little bit of inline JavaScript data. So if you clicked view source, you would see a property called, or an object called my data. I have dummy values here of, sky equals blue, grass equals green, and then I have something called nonce equals this. Essentially, WordPress needs to see this nonce value in your request so that it knows someone didn't trick you into making that request. In other words, if someone got you to accidentally click on a button or link that you didn't mean to actually click on, and it took you to a REST API URL, well, your browser would automatically send your cookie along, right? That's how cookies work. They just get sent along by default. But that would have no way of accessing this nonce value. Right? If you go click view source on this page, even if someone got you to click on a link that made a request to the REST API, that link would have no way of accessing the DOM or this code in this page. So by requiring this nonce value, that's how the REST API can be protected from CSRF attacks. Anyways, if you're building interactive features that people will actually use on your website, then this example we just looked at, it's the right tool for the right job. However, what if you're building a completely external application? It could be anything, right? It could be a desktop app, could be an iOS or Android app, could be just a separate PHP or Python app, just any environment where cookies are not part of the equation, right? You want something that should be able to authenticate programmatically on its own without needing you to actually be logged in anywhere in your browser. Or in other words, this would just be what most of us would have assumed is the entire point of a REST API in the first place. So for example, in an app like Postman or Insomnia, how could we programmatically create a blog post through the REST API? Well, for the first few years of the REST API's life in WordPress, this wasn't possible without a plugin. However, as of December 2020, WordPress has added a great feature called application passwords. Let me show you how they work. Before we actually set up an example request in Postman or Insomnia, let's go generate an application password. So back in the WordPress admin dashboard, in the left-hand sidebar, click on Users. I'll click on my one admin account user. From this profile screen, just scroll down towards the very bottom and you'll see application passwords. So we give sort of a name or a label for each password. For example, if you were creating an iOS app, you could call it, iOS application password or, Android app password. I'll just give it a name or label of Insomnia REST Example. You just click Add New Application Password. And now, in the real world, you would not want to let anyone see this value. But because this is just a local installation for a fake website, you can see my application password. That's okay. Also, just to be clear, you would want to store this somewhere safe because there's no way for you to retrieve it ever again. Now, it's not really a big deal. You could just generate a new password. But if you don't want to have to keep generating new ones, you do want to keep this somewhere safe. For now, I'm just going to copy it into my clipboard. Okay, we can close this. And now down here, you'll see a list of any and all application passwords that you've created so far. You can always revoke or remove them. The last used date is accurate to within 24 hours. WordPress sets it up like that, so that way they're not constantly updating the database, every second or every minute as it's getting used. So it's only accurate to within 24 hours, but that's still super useful to be able to see, has this password actually been used anytime recently? Would it be a big deal if you just revoke it or delete it? Anyways, let's go use it now. So back in Postman or Insomnia, I'll just create a new request. I'll give it a name of WordPress create post example. The name absolutely doesn't matter. Let's make it a post request though instead of a GET request. And for the body, let's make it JSON that we're sending. Okay, let's go ahead and create that. Now, in terms of the URL that we actually want to push to, HTTP, my own local domain, and then it's at the end / for the REST API is wp-json /wp/v2/posts. That's the endpoint for creating or working with posts. In the JSON body, let's just have curly brackets. I'll have one property called title, and I'll say quick REST test, comma, let's have a property called content. You could just include any string of text, but if you wanted to include a WordPress block, you could just have the HTML comments for a Gutenberg block. So HTML comment that looks like this, WP : for example, paragraph. Close that out. This is amazing content. Close out the paragraph. So a comment that looks like this with a / WP paragraph. And then finally, you want a property called status. And this is where you can set it to be a draft, or if you want it to actually be, launched in public, it would be a status of publish. Now, at the moment, we haven't authenticated this request. So if we tried to send it, it's absolutely going to fail. Right? We don't have permission. It's not like anyone in the world can just post a blog post to your website. But all we need to do to use our application password is just go into auth here. Just click this arrow to choose what type of auth, and it's basic auth. Now this will be different if you're in Postman or depending on which programming language you're using. But if you just Google for whatever platform or language you're trying to use, plus the phrase basic auth, you'll figure out exactly how to do this for your language and platform. Essentially, your username is just your WordPress username, and then your password, that's not the password you log in with, it's that 24-character application password we just set up. So I'll just paste that in from my clipboard here, and now if I actually send this request, it can successfully go through. So just to prove that it worked, if I go back into WordPress and view all of my posts, there it is, quick REST test. Cool, so you can use this from anywhere, any external application. It doesn't matter what language, what platform, right? Because it doesn't need to rely on the web browser and cookies. So just for a quick example here at the end, my favorite server-side language is Node.js. So now I could create a Node application and it could exist anywhere in the world on any domain. And let me pull up the reference code. I won't bore you by writing the code right here and right now. I'll include a link to GitHub where you can borrow this code. But essentially, I just wrote a little bit of Node code. Let me paste in my new application password. And really all that's going on is we're just making a network request, right? An HTTP request to the URL that you might expect. Let me change that to the domain for this video so it's brand new empty. And then every programming language will be a little bit different in terms of how you actually include the username and password. So essentially with basic auth, you just include your username, your password, but then it needs to be using base 64. So this is an example of how you would do that using Node.js, but I'm sure if you Googled for, basic auth PHP or basic auth Python or basic auth Ruby, you'd find something very similar. But that's it. You just use that 24-character password that WordPress gave you. Let me save this and test it out. So if I run this node index and go check my list of posts, there you see, hello from Node. Again, if you're a fan of Node, I'll include a link to this file on GitHub so you could try this out yourself. You would just need to swap in your domain name here and then your username and application password here. Really quick at the end of the video here, I want to include a couple caveats or extra info. First of all, because base 64 is not encryption, right? It's not secret. Anyone that could intercept this can read your username and password. Because of that, you really only want to do this over HTTPS. Now, my testing local domain does start with HTTP instead of S. I believe application passwords only worked for me because maybe the local WP app somehow configures this automatically for you. But the point here is if you're working with a real copy of WordPress that's installed on an actual web host and you're not using HTTPS, I believe WordPress just completely disables the application passwords feature. So it will not work for you. For more information on that, and really just for more information on application passwords in general, check out this URL. If you Google for just WordPress application passwords, it should be the first real result. Anyways, if you scroll down about a quarter through the page, you'll see authorization flow. Not only does this explain the whole HTTPS situation and how you can test whether your copy of WordPress has this feature enabled or not, but it also explains how if you were building a real application for lots and lots of users to use, well, it explains how you could build your application for maybe website owners and they would be prompted to log into their copy of WordPress to give your third-party application the application password. So that's super cool. That's a great useful feature if you're building an app that's actually going to be used by lots of different people. I didn't cover that in our example because I'm usually creating bespoke solutions for individual clients. So I can just go generate the application password myself. Cool. That is going to bring this video to a close. If you enjoyed the video and you want to learn more about WordPress or JavaScript, I do have several premium courses available. You can find this URL in the description for this video. This includes heavily discounted coupons to each and every one of my courses. This course here is all about WordPress development. I just added a new chapter about block themes and full site editing. And this course is all about JavaScript, both front end and back end. Also, if you're interested in creating Gutenberg block types, in addition to the WordPress course, you might want to just learn about React in general. Finally, if you're interested in plugin development, you might want to learn about MySQL. That's enough shameless self-promotion. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you feel like you learned something, and stay tuned for more web development tutorials.